Hello everyone and welcome to Burnt Toaster Productions. I'm your host, Burnt Toaster. I wasn't planning on doing this run until later, but due to having some problems regarding the relationship between my capture card and OBS, I had to do this one to get something out this month. Plus, I was curious if I could do it. There's really only 3 rules, which are, I can only damage enemies with fists, magic, besides shouts and racial powers, will not be allowed. Companions are barred, unless they're required for a quest. Other than that, there's not much else to go over as there isn't any race restriction or mods. This is pretty much vanilla Anniversary Edition Skyrim. Before the video begins though, tell me down in the comments section what other runs or games you might be interested in seeing. I'll be sure to, at the very least, test them out and see if I can make a video out of any of your suggestions. Now, without further ado, let's get into this run. We start in the cart as usual. Once it stops and we're about to be sent to the headsman's block, I can create my character for this run. Now, the most optimal race to go for is Khajiit, which is due to their unarmed damage being naturally higher than any other race. But who likes being optimal? So instead I go for an Orsimer. My reasoning behind this choice is that they start with a higher heavy armor skill, which means I can get the Fists of Steel perk sooner, and I'll also have the Berserker Rage racial power that allows them to deal double damage and take half damage for 1 minute. If I run across anything that seems to be kicking me like a donkey, I'll be able to pop the power and hopefully deal with them a bit more easily. With all that said, I'd like you all to meet Thrash, a crazed orc that refuses to use a weapon of any kind. Unless you count his fists as weapons, then, well, you get the point. With introductions out of the way, Alduin drops by to scream at everyone, and that means it's time to get out of Helgen. As usual, I follow Ralof because screw the Empire, and Thrash will be able to nab some heavy armor from the start. My first taste of combat does not leave me excited for later fights. I can't block or break an enemy's guard. As you can imagine, fights feel like they drag on longer than usual because practically everyone in Skyrim has at least an iron dagger on them, and they usually can block. Regardless, the Imperials go down and Thrash can grab some armor. The rest of this dungeon doesn't put up much of a fight, even the bear was kind of a pushover. Once Thrash is free to roam the land, I get over to the Standing Stones, choose the Warrior's Stone, mark Embershard Mine on the map, and head to Riverwood to sell some things off. When I'm done buying and selling, I make my way back over to the mine and beat the daylights out of any bandit that is unfortunate enough to be in my general vicinity. The biggest draw for going through the mine is to gain a little bit of extra money and increase Thrash's heavy armor skill. In order to get the Fists of Steel perk, a heavy armor skill of 25 is required, as well as a rank of Juggernaut. I'll get into more detail about how Fists of Steel works once I get it. Now that all the bandits have been evicted from the land of the living, I go back to Riverwood again, sell some stuff, and head off to Bleak Barrow. Thrash punches some bandits into a permanent coma and gets into the dungeon. Once inside, I decide to take on the bandit outlaw in the first puzzle room. It took a little bit, but eventually he got knocked the hell out and I can continue on. The most notable encounter thus far is with the giant frostbite spider, though that is mostly due to the fact that it's quite tanky and has access to poison. But I had a feeling I wasn't going to deal the greatest damage to it, so when the fight began I used Berserker Rage and pummeled that arachnid into oblivion. Since the spider is no more, I turn my attention to Arvel, and well, he's down and out for the count. I grab the claw and push forward. Up next are a series of Draugr fights that take a hot minute to get through. Draugr are surprisingly resilient against a bit of pugilism, but I have enough experience to level up and a high enough skill level to get the perk of the day, Fists of Steel. What it does is use the armor rating of your gauntlets and adds that to your unarmed damage. However, I didn't realize this until much later in the run, but it only uses base armor rating, so improving your gauntlets doesn't increase the amount of damage a punch deals. It also, as far as I know, doesn't scale with the Juggernaut perk either. Looking back on it now, I kind of wish I went with the Khajiit, but at the same time, this channel already has a Khajiit character and I wanted something different. Regardless, several knocked out undead later, I made it to the end of the dungeon. I was a little worried about how well I would do against the boss here since he can be dangerous, so to quell my worries, I waited for a day so the Berserker Rage ability would be free to use again. And well, it was about as difficult as boxing a small child with no hand-eye coordination. Poor guy didn't even get to swing his axe. With that done, I grab the stone and head back to Riverwood to do a little trading and prepare to go to Whiterun. I get over to Whiterun and decide to upgrade my current armor from the cheaply made Imperial garbage to the more protective steel armor. I also upgrade it and then head off to see the Jarl. As usual, the Jarl wants me to help Farengar, but I already have the stone, so I give it to him, and then we get the news that a dragon is attacking. Before heading to battle, I prepared by purchasing some potions. I don't think the steel armor is going to protect too much from a good old dragon chomp or their extra spicy breath. I also can't use healing spells, so potions are going to be what keeps Thrash alive during any moderately challenging fights. Not that the dragon is ever really that difficult, but it does have the ability to fly around and attack from range. Meanwhile, Thrash is an extraordinarily close range fighter because, as you would expect, fists don't have a lot of range to them. So Thrash will have to stick to the dragon's face to deal any real damage. We make it over to the Watchtower and wait for the flying lizard to get over here. It lands fairly soon after making its appearance. So I did what any normal, well-adjusted individual would do. I ran straight to the thing and started punching that snout. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, the dragon does some good damage. After healing up, I decide to use Berserker Rage. Now I'm dealing decent damage. The dragon tried getting further away, but it didn't work in its favor since I had a nice amount of stamina potions to help close the distance. A little more punching later, the dragon is defeated. Now I can go back to Whiterun and collect my reward from the Jarl. Afterwards, I decided to try to gain some capital by clearing out bandits from a variety of locations. I was looking to grind out some levels for smithing so I can craft better gear. Thrash isn't much of a tank after all, at least when it comes to dragons. There will be more fights with them later on, and I want to be a bit more prepared than what I was now. Eventually, I did want to move the story along and made my way to Iverstead so I could talk to the Greybeards and get their quest over with. While walking up the path, there's the inevitable Frost Troll encounter. Since I have armor and a semi-decent supply of health potions, I wanted to fight it. The troll is dealing moderately high damage to me, meanwhile I'm not doing the best damage to it. Even with Berserker Rage active, it's more of a battle of attrition than anything. As long as I have enough potions to heal, I'll be able to get through this fight. Though my potion stock will be lower, but that's not a huge issue. Anyway, I wallop this wintry troll and push forward, making it to High Hrothgar. After talking with them and a little training, the dirty old men on the mountain want me to find the horn of Jurgen Windcaller. Before heading to Ustengrav, I went to Whiterun and decided to make a backpack. I was a little unsure of using it since I wanted a more vanilla experience, but it's really just so I can carry more loot and some crafting items such as ingots and leather. I will say I don't really like the look of the backpack, so I'll probably get rid of it at some point. I make my way to Ustengrav and fight the enemies outside of the dungeon. The only reason I mention this particular fight is due to some hit detection issues with unarmed attacks. You'd think I was punching this resurrected bandit, but apparently I didn't. This issue could complicate things in the future, but I'll worry about that later. When Thrash gets inside, he has to deal with some magically inclined enemies. And honestly, I think out of the standard types of enemies in the game, mages are going to be more of a threat than any melee opponents. And that is due to armor not protecting against magic, unless it's enchanted. But these spell-slinging mages are wearing robes and have practically no way to protect themselves against blunt force trauma from someone's fist. Once the mages have been battered black and blue, it's time to move on and take on some more Draugr. Which isn't horrendously difficult, though the Restless Draugr are a nice bit tankier than the mages and bandits. Anyway, after fighting off the undead with only my fists, I delve deeper into Ustengrav, solve the whirlwind sprint puzzle, and get to the end. Only reason I skipped so much of what happened is because it's not really all that exciting or notable. As we all know, the horn isn't here, so I have to go to Riverwood and talk to Delphine in the inn. She gives me the horn and the next quest I have to do. And that quest involves knocking out another dragon in Kynesgrove. So I got over there and prepared myself. The last time I could somewhat exploit how long it took the dragon to reform. I still can, but it's not going to be nearly as damaging as it was in the Cat and Footwear run. I decided to use Berserker Rage as soon as it started climbing out of the ground, and even with Berserker Rage, I'm not dealing the best of damage. It's not bad enough that it'll take Thrash out of action, but I also have Delphine here helping with some of the damage. So I'm probably going to have to upgrade to a better set of armor soon. Since the dragon is now defeated, Delphine and I part ways temporarily as I head back to the old guys to give them their horn. Once they have it, they recognize Thrash as Dragonborn. But I do want to upgrade Thrash's armor, so I leave High Hrothgar and head to various cities to buy smithing supplies and get to grinding out some smithing levels. which took me about 20 minutes. Not bad, but it'll take substantially longer as Thrash becomes more skilled with smithing. So before I handle the next quest, I take some jobs in Whiterun for some loot to sell to regain what capital I lost while buying smithing supplies. Said jobs just require me to go around and clear out some more bandit hideouts. With my new set of dwarven armor, I am at least quite a bit tankier. And standard bandits don't fare too well, 3 punches and they're out like a light. Though tougher bandits such as bandit chiefs will take substantially more punishment before falling. However, Berserker Rage allows me to deal with any of the more difficult bandits easily. After clearing out a few places, I head back to various cities to sell off the loot and grab some more smithing supplies. I'm wanting to get the Orcish set since Thrash is an Orsimer. This felt like it fit him better than the Dwarven stuff. Partway through my grinding, I decided to stop so I can continue the main quest. I talked to Delphine to get the name of the contact in Solitude and head on over there. I give Malborn all my stuff and meet Delphine at the stables. She gives me the clothes I need and the invitation. With that, Thrash is off to liven up a party. I get inside without any problems and get to work on creating a distraction. I know all I have to do is give this Redguard a drink and he'll do the rest. What I meant by liven up a party is Thrash will be beating some Altmerry faces like a war drum. So I went through as usual, taking out the Thalmor trash and grabbing their valuables. When I reached the end, however, I got stuck. Malborn and 2 to 3 Thalmor are supposed to spawn in. The Thalmor have the key to the trapdoor over here, which means I have to restart the quest from the beginning. As much as I want to complain about having to go through the quest again, looking back, it's a relatively small issue. It's not like it's difficult, just a bit tedious. So I go through it again, annihilating the Thalmor in the embassy, and reach the end. This time the High Elves spawn and I get to work beating them. Ah, nothing quite like the crack of High Elf bones in the morning. Malborn does nothing, so to repay his laziness, Thrash acquaints his fist with Malborn's face. Several times. With all that done, it's time to get out of here, and of course I wanted to fight the Frost Troll here. It took some potions and a bit of time to kill, but the troll falls and I can finally leave. I go back to Riverwood and wait a bit so I can sell off those Thalmor goods and buy some more smithing materials to grind smithing levels. I then go to a couple of other cities to sell more stuff and buy more ingots and the like. I also took a couple of jobs in Riften to regain some money and get back to grinding. Eventually, I finally get the Orcish smithing perk and can craft that armor. One of the jobs I took in Riften was a bounty on a dragon, which wasn't exactly fun because the area I had to go to wasn't a nice flat plain. There was only one close landing spot for the dragon, and because of that I had to sit around and hide in a tower until it landed. Otherwise, Thrash would be turned into a charcoal briquette. Until it couldn't fly anymore, then I had to go right outside the tower and show that dragon the power of Thrash's fist. Now that the dragon is dead, I grab some scales and bones to sell so I can get plenty of materials for the Orcish armor. With the armor made and improved, it's time to talk to Delphine for the next quest. Delphine tells me to head to Riften and find Esbern, who is hiding in the Ratway. As usual, I don't ask Brynjolf for help and just head down there to find Esbern myself. Let's just say the lowlives down here do not stand a chance against a couple of punches hurled their way. In the Ratway vaults, I have more Thalmor to fight. This wizard was probably terrified of a heavily armored unarmed orc running towards him and ended up running into a trap as he tried to run away. Of course, a soldier soon comes into the room, but they, like the wizard, fall without much struggle. Eventually, I find where Esbern is located and have to wait for him to unlock his door. I suppose, given the fact that the Thalmor are here looking for him, it's not surprising he's got a bit of pre-paranoia. He finally gets the locks unlocked and lets me into his room. I, of course, take the opportunity to grab anything that's moderately valuable, and then we get ready to head out of here. But not before we're greeted by some Thalmor friends. The wizard was the scariest one, due to his ranged capabilities, but Thrash made sure to show him what he thinks of that high elf superiority complex. Now that the place is pretty much clear, Esbern and Thrash get out of there to meet Delphine in Riverwood. After they finish talking to one another, Esbern tells us where Alduin's wall is located, and I tell them to meet me there as I want to prepare first. I'm going to need some potions due to the 2 dragons that spawn as soon as I get close to Karthspire camp. After my preparations are made, I head over there. And just like clockwork, the dragons appear. Once again, it's a normal dragon and a blood dragon, one with frost breath and the other has fire breath. Although with Esbern and Delphine nearby, I have some help dealing with the scaly beasts. As soon as the normal dragon lands, I use Berserker Rage to try to get rid of it as quickly as possible, which works out pretty smoothly. Now I can focus on the blood dragon. Not long after its friend falls, the blood dragon lands and Thrash can get to beating the ever-living hell out of it. And just like with the normal dragon, this works out pretty well. Now we can get through Karthspire and find that wall. When we entered, there are some Forsworn to deal with, but I just got done fighting 2 dragons with only my fist, so these guys aren't going to stand a chance. After the Forsworn are cleared, all that's left is a bit of puzzle solving, and voila, we have made it to the wall. Esbern tells us that the ancient Nords used a particular shout, but we don't know what shout specifically. And you know what that means. It's time to visit the old men again. Before heading over to the mountain-dwelling old men, I decided to grind some more smithing levels. I wanted to get some ebony armor since I never really got to that point in any of my personal saves. Plus, I thought it'd look pretty cool, and this is probably the only run that gives me an excuse to grab the ebony smithing perk. But I've still got a ways to go and I dislike long grinding sessions, so after I reach a smithing skill of 60, I stop and go visit the Greybeards to ask them about that shout. One of the Greybeards gives me the Clear Skies shout, and then it's up to me to ascend further up the mountain and talk to Parthenax. He tells me that the ancient Nords used an Elder Scroll to throw Alduin forward in time. He also says I should be able to view things as they happened back then with the help of an Elder Scroll, since dragon minds can't comprehend Dragonrend. Now I have to go and ask someone where I may find one or at least some information on Elder Scrolls. Rather than rush into the whole quest to grab an Elder Scroll, I prepared by purchasing a variety of potions. I know what awaits me when I go to get the scroll, though I feel confident in my abilities to deal with the Thalmor. When I'm done, I go over to Winterhold, shout to get into the magic school, and ask Urag about Elder Scrolls. He gives me a couple of books and somewhat points me in the direction of Septimus Cygnus. I find the crazed old guy and he gives me the location of one that's fairly close by, as well as 2 little doodads to access it. But first I have to go through a dungeon full of Thalmor, and to the surprise of no one, my confidence got me killed. Which means I've gotten the first death of the run here. But I know it's still very possible to get through here, I just have to play smart. The enemy I thought I was going to have trouble with turned out to be surprisingly easy. The Dwarven Centurion right before Blackreach turned out to be a joke since I used Berserker Rage. Honestly, I thought it would have been a much tougher fight, but I guess not. The 2 people after the Centurion were more difficult, but after a nice stretch of fighting, I went through to Blackreach. And like always, there's a Dwarven Sphere here to slice Thrash up like some Thanksgiving ham. Of course, after I deal with the Sphere, a Thalmor drops by and almost ends Thrash right there. It's only thanks to my preparations that I survived that encounter. As I push further into Blackreach, I stumble upon a Wisp Mother and almost get obliterated once again. This time I had to book it so I could avoid going through this little slice of fresh hell again. I make it to the end mostly intact and get to work on grabbing that scroll, which is a nice, easy reprieve from getting poisoned by some blind creatures that don't know how to cease to exist and being assaulted by mechanical menaces. Now I've got the scroll and can head back to the Throat of the World and read it to get that shout. Though before I do, I stop by Whiterun to sell some loot, get a job or 2, and get to work grinding my smithing skill, especially since I know where the ebony mine is. It takes me a good couple of hours to get my skill up to 80, and the reason why is I decided to go through the internet, find some mines, clear them out if needed, and grab some ores. Smithing is an expensive hobby and I wanted to attempt to cut costs a bit. When I'm finally skilled enough, I go to the ebony mine and grab as much ebony ore as I can find. Then I head to Whiterun and get to smithing. After the set is done, I improve it and get rid of that backpack since it looks kinda goofy with the ebony armor set. Now I can get on with the main quest without any further interruptions. I get up to the mountain peak, read the scroll, and learn the Dragonrend shout. And Alduin drops by after Thrash comes back to reality. I use the shout and good gravy is Alduin one tough opponent. He's quite the tinky fella and I ended up getting blasted by a meteor because I didn't pay attention to my health. During the next attempt there was a bug. I used the shout before he finished his little spiel and it made Alduin invulnerable. I couldn't even hit him, which ended Thrash's existence via barbecuing. After a little break I tried again and this time things worked as intended. I could deal damage to him, though not much at all. And this isn't even the final fight, which had me a little worried. Regardless, I beat him into submission and he flew off. After the fight, I talked to Arngeir and he tells me about Dragon's Reach being used to capture a dragon. I'll need to catch one to find out where Alduin is, and I'll need Balgruuf's cooperation in order to trap the dragon. But instead of doing that now, I once again went around to different cities to restock my potions since the Alduin fight had left very few potions left, and I'm going to need some more when I chase after him to end his reign of terror once and for all. After I get most of the potions I think I'll need, I travel to Whiterun and speak with the Jarl about the plan to trap a dragon. He won't allow it until there is a temporary truce between the Empire and Stormcloaks. With that said, I go back to High Hrothgar and convince Arngeir to hold a peace council. I then go talk with the faction leaders and get this thing going. I didn't have any particular outcome I wanted, I just breezed through it until everything was settled. With a truce made, Esbern gives me the name of a dragon, and that means I can head back to Whiterun to trap that flying rat. I shout his name and lead him back until the trap activates and catches him. Of course, we can't reach Alduin since Thrash sadly doesn't have the gift of flight, but Odahviing does and offers to take him to Skuldafn. Since I feel I've made all the necessary preparations, I tell Odahviing to take me there, and that means punching more Draugr. The normal Draugr get dropped within 2 hits, so I feel like I'm going to be mostly fine. There are the 2 dragons to deal with, and that dragon priest at the end. One of the dragons lands, and after I used Berserker Rage, the dragon's health was depleted in no time. Now there's only one of the scaled creatures to deal with in this area. Also, it looks like it was a good idea for me to upgrade my armor. With Rage active, the restless Draugr that were giving some trouble are now falling in 3 strikes. Eventually, the other dragon lands, and it's time to fight it. The good thing is, I'm tanky enough to not lose a bunch of health from a single bite, so with a bit of time, the dragon is done for. As you know, that's not the end of this area, there's still the dungeon and puzzles I have to get through first. I will say that Draugr Wights are actually kind of scary. They're fairly tough and deal enough damage to be comparable with my own. Thrash almost met his end, but to be fair, he did just get done knocking out a dragon and a couple of other Draugr. Still, I had cut it close and got lucky. A light bit of puzzle solving and Draugr punching later, I emerge from the dungeon and have probably the most difficult fight here. The dragon priest will grab that staff and boy does it do some damage. Even though the priest only has half health, I have to be careful because if I'm not, I'll get zapped like a bug. Except I didn't because the dragon priest decided to not use the staff and instead used other spells. The priest went back to sleep after that. Well, with that done, it's time to get into Sovngarde and take care of Alduin. So in Sovngarde, all I have to do is walk a bit and talk to Soon. Soon is sort of the gatekeeper here, and his only job is to test the Metal of Souls popping through to enter the Hall of Valor. And Soon is a bit scary with his axe, though this time I have substantially more protection and prove my worth through the power of my fists. Now I can enter the hall. Once I do, I decide to take most of the food that I can find since I didn't want to use any of my potion stock until the final fight with Alduin. After gorging himself with a variety of foods, Thrash meets with the heroes of old who set out to finish this. So together we dissipate the fog and I have to use Dragon Rend to force Alduin down, so I can punch him in his snout. Well, really, I started to punch his side and that was to basically test the waters. He didn't seem to be doing too much damage. But after using Dragon Rend a second time, I eventually began feeding my fist to his face. With the combined might of Thrash's fists and the heroes of old, Alduin is finally slain, and now Thrash can return to Nirn. After Parthenax and Odahviing talk, Thrash decided to go to the highest point of the mountain and jump. He thought that since he defeated Alduin, he'd be able to fly, but all he really did was shatter his ankles. And with that, the run is finished. Well, it's definitely possible to beat Skyrim with only your fists. Of course, the optimal way to do this would have been to grind some enchanting levels as well as smithing and be a Khajiit. But I've never liked enchanting all that much anyway in this game, even if this would have been the run to do it in because I wouldn't have much use for any weapon enchantments. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, especially if you want to see more content like this in the future. And be sure to tell me what other games or runs you'd like to see me go through. If I have the game, I'll do my best to make a video out of it. This has been Burnt Toaster of Burnt Toaster Productions, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.